Okay, so we did the story of an hour by Katie Chaplin, and we were making a prediction of who and how Mrs. Mallard got told the news of her husband's death, who was in a train accident. So I'm just gonna read it and tell you guys what we thought about it. Knowing that Mrs. Mallard was afflicted with heart trouble, great care was taken to break to her as gently as possible the news of her husband's death. It was her sister Josephine who told her, in broken sentences, veiled hints that revealed and half concealing. Her husband's friend Richards was there, too, near her. It was he who had been in the newspaper office when intelligence of the railroad disaster was received, with Brentley Mallard's name leading the list of killed. He had only taken the time to assure himself of its truth by a second telegram and had hastened to forestall any less careful, less tender friend in bearing the sad message. So this paragraph just kind of describes like how Mrs. Mallard was told the news of her husband's death and what happened to him. So this is just we just talked about finding out what happened to him and how she got told the news.
All right. She did not hear the story as many women have heard the same, with the paralyzed inability to accept its significance. She wept at once with sudden, wild abandonment in her sister's arms. When the storm of grief had spent itself, she went away to her room alone. She would have no one follow her. So Mrs. Mallard is the wife, we're assuming, and she is taking the loss very hard. She's like depressed and she just wants to be alone and just cry and be by herself. There stood, facing the open window, a comfortable, roomy armchair. Into this she sank, pressed down by a physical exhaustion that haunted her body and seemed to reach into her soul. So this is saying how she's not only physically drained, but she's also mentally drained. The part where it says haunted her body and seemed to reach into her soul, it's talking about how she's just getting really affected by this. And next part is she could see in the open square before her house the tops of trees that were all aquiver with the new spring life. The delicious breath of rain was in the air. In the street below, a peddler was crying his wares. The notes of a distant song which someone was singing reached her faintly, and countless sparrows and tweeting in the eaves. So this is her like glancing outside and like she's trying to like get away from what has happened, but everything that happens just reminds her of her husband. And this is where we're visualizing what she's looking at, and she's visualizing what's outside. And yeah.
Okay, so the next part is there were patches of blue sky showing here and there through the clouds that had met and piled one above the other in the west-facing window. So this was, we kind of put a visualization because she's looking out her window and visualizing everything, and yeah, so she's just visualizing everything out her window, and it's just explaining what she sees. She sat with her head thrown back upon the cushion of the chair, quite motionless, except when a sob came up into her throat and shook her, as a child who has cried itself to sleep continues to sob in its dreams. So we kind of use this as a comparison of a child sobbing in its dreams. It's like a sentence. What was it? Relating. A sentence relating. So like she kind of used a comparison where the child was crying itself to sleep because she's sobbing and because she's so upset about her husband dying. She was young, with a fair, calm face whose lines bespoke repression, even a certain strength. But now there was a dull stare in her eyes, whose gaze was fixed away off yonder on one of those patches of blue sky. It was not a glance of reflection, but rather indicated a suspension of intelligent thought. This kind of talks about she seems happy at first almost, and she's young, but like I feel like at the end of this she kind of seems like she's older and kind of worn down because of what happened, because she's been staring out the window for what it seems like a long time, because she's still really, really upset, which anyone would be. So yeah.
All right. There was something coming to her, and she was waiting for it fearfully. What is it? She did not know. It was too subtle and exclusive to name, but she felt it creeping out of the sky, reaching toward her through the sounds, the scents, the color that filled the air. So she's trying to move on, and she's trying to be positive about things, but it's really hard, obviously, because her husband just died. But she seems to be doing all right with it. Okay. Now her bosom rose and fell tremendously. She was beginning to recognize this thing that was approaching to possess her, and she was striving to beat it back with her will, as powerless as her white, slender hands would have been. So she's trying really hard to fight through her sorrow still, and seems like she's starting to get through it, but I mean it's really hard to do. Okay. When she abandoned herself, a little whispered word escaped her slightly parted lips. She said it over and over under her breath, free, free, free. The vacant stare and the look of terror that had followed it went from her eyes. They stayed keen and bright. Her pulses beat fast, and the coursing blood warmed and relaxed every inch of her body. So now it seems like she's just fine, which is pretty confusing because she's saying free, 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 which is why is she happy that her husband is dead? She's free, I guess, and now, so that was confusion. So yeah.
She did not stop to ask if it were or were not a monstrous joy that held her. A clear and exalted perception enabled her to dismiss the suggestion as trivial. So it kind of almost seems like she's accepting his death and that she's alone, but we don't really know why she's really happy about being alone. We maybe think that she just got married or maybe really didn't like him that much, but she knew that she would weep again, and when she saw the kind, tender hands folded in death, the face that had never looked save with love upon her, fixed and gray and dead. But she saw beyond that bitter moment a long procession of years to come that would belong to her absolutely, and she opened and spread her arms out to them in welcome. So it's almost like she's welcoming herself being alone and being herself again, so kind of like being single. But there will be no one to live for her during those coming years. She would live for herself. There would be no powerful will bending hers in that blind persistence and with which men and women believe they have a right to impose a private will upon a fellow creature. A kind intention or a cruel intention made the act seem no less as crime as she looked upon it in brief moment of illumination. So yeah, it just seems like she's very happy that she gets to be alone and live her life the way she wants to.
Okay. And yet she had loved him sometimes, often she had not. What did it matter? What could love, the unsolved mystery, count for in the face of possession, of self-assertion, which she suddenly recognized as the strongest impulse of her being? Alright, she seems almost relieved that he's gone, and we put text to self for this because she probably didn't think that's what you would think when your husband left, but I think in real life you don't realize something's bad for you until it's gone, so I think that's what she realizes here. So, free body and soul free, she kept whispering. Josephine was kneeling before the closed door with her lips to the keyhole, imploring for admission. Louise, open the door. I beg, open the door. You will make yourself ill. What are you doing, Louise? For heaven's sake, open the door. No, go away. I'm making myself ill. No, she was drinking in a very exhilarating of life through the open window. So her sister's concerned about her. She's in the room alone, and she's thinking that she's grieving, and she's thinking very bad things that she's doing, and she's actually not. She's actually very happy about what's happening.
Her fancy was running right along those days ahead of her, spring days and summer days and all sorts of days that would be her own. She breathed a quick prayer that life might be long. It was only yesterday she had thought with a shudder that life might be long. This kind of just says that, days to herself is kind of like she gets to be her own person and figure out who she is in her life. And just pretty much live the way she wants to be, because she thought it would be a lot longer than shorter with her husband. So, she rose at length and opened the door to her sister's importunities. There was a feverish triumph in her eyes, and she carried herself unwittingly like a goddess of victory. She clasped her sister's waist, and together they descended the stairs. Richard stood waiting for them at the bottom. Someone was opening the front door with a latch key. It was Brentley Mallard who entered, a little travel-stained, composedly carrying his gripsack and umbrella. He had been far from the scene of the accident. It did not even know there had been one. He stood amazed at Josephine's piercing cry, at Richard's quick moment to screen him from the view of his wife. In a way, we kind of made a prediction that he was alive. I kind of knew that he might be still alive, because it just kind of seemed like this was the type of story that would do that. cause it just kind of said like he did a telegram, but it doesn't really, I don't know, cause it
for sure.
we didn't really know for sure because it doesn't really say that she got the telegram. It just says there was a telegram that his friend had gotten, so we weren't really sure. And then the last one was, but Richards was too late. When the doctors came, they said that she had died of heart disease, of joy that kills. So she was already really excited to be by herself. So he was alive, but then she died of joy, which is like a heart disease, I guess. But like we did an exclamation point for that because it was like super surprising for us. Like we're like, she just died because she was super joyful that she got to be by herself, but like she didn't even get to see her husband alive. So we kind of thought that was a little bit of irony in there.
Yeah.
So,
and then for post reading, we're just the story. So it's about her finding out that her husband died, and it makes you seem like she's really sad, which she is at first, but she realizes how happy she is, and she starts celebrating how happy she is that she's finally alone, but really, and then she ends up dying from joy, and he's still alive, and it's a really crazy story. So, yeah. Anything else?
No, not really, other than the surprising death that that was like, I was like, okay. But, yeah, overall it was a really good story, and I feel like the author was kind of, I don't really know the audience it was trying, I think it could have been, like,
Just anyone,
really. Yeah, because it could be us, it could be...
thrilling. It's like a thriller.
It's kind of like a thriller, but, like, it's like an
ending.
1849, or 94, so it's kind of like an older one, so... Yeah, that's about it.